Okay, here we are in Google Sheets, and we're going to try and make a box plot. Now, unfortunately, Google Sheets does not make a true box plot. It creates something else called a candlestick chart. A candlestick chart looks similar to a box plot, except it does not have that middle bar, which represents the median or the second quartile. So it's just the best that we can do. So instead of creating a true box plot in Google Sheets, you'll be creating candlestick charts. Now, to create a candlestick chart in Google Sheets, it requires a little more work than Microsoft Excel. In Microsoft Excel, you could simply just select those two columns and do insert chart. And then under the chart type, if you scroll down to candlestick chart, if you try and do this in Google Sheets, it's going to tell you, it's going to give you an error, and you can't graph it. And that's because you just can't chart things the same in Google Sheets as you can in Microsoft Excel. What you have to do is you have to actually provide the minimum, the first quartile, the third quartile, and the maximum for each random variable, and then you'll end up creating charts of those 5 cells. And then you'll create a chart of those 5 cells. And then it'll work. So Google Sheets, you have to do a little bit more work in order to make a candlestick chart. So to kind of let you know how I got to this point, first of all, here's my raw data spreadsheet. So the first thing I did was I came over here and I clicked duplicate. Okay, that makes a copy of my raw data. So my raw data is left alone. And then you can just double click on this new copy. And then that's where I called it box plot, height, and drop. And that's how I got this one. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, so that's how I got this spreadsheet copy. And then I just went to, these cells, and I just added random variable, came over here, typed in minimum, came over here, typed in quadrant 1 or quartile 1, and here quartile 3, and then maximum. Okay. And I just put this here as a note for you, since you're watching this, that candlestick charts do not have medians. So we don't need to calculate a median column here in the middle. All right, so how do we go about calculating the minimums, the maximums, the first quartile and the third quartile? Well, we use functions to do that. So very similar to Microsoft Excel, if you want to tell Google Sheets that you want to use a formula, what you do is you click in this cell that you want to calculate, in this case, the minimum of this height random variable. So click in this cell and then type an equal sign. When you type an equal sign in both Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets, it tells the program, I'm about ready to type in a formula. And so the formula we want to use is going to be a minimum. So if you type in MIN, it tries to guess which function you want to use. And I'm going to left click on minimum here. And then it tells me I need a number of values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click once on the first value in this height random variable. And you'll notice that I left clicked here once. So I've highlighted this cell E2. And it put E2 here in this formula. But what I want to do actually is I don't want to highlight just this cell. I want to highlight all of these cells that have all of this data. So with just that one selected, I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of my data. Okay. And this is very important. Hold down this shift key and then left click on the last one. And you can see now it's selected all of the data from that first to the last. And now it says E2 colon E242, which means everything from E2 to E242. So that's all the data. And then I'll put a right parentheses to close that off and then hit enter. And that is the minimum of this height variable here. Now it's trying to auto guess what I want here for this next one. I'm just going to hit no. Okay. And so now this cell has the number 8 instead of being blank. But as I click on this cell that says 8, if you look over here to the left, this is the formula that's generating that number 8. So we hit equals, we typed in the word minimum, we clicked from cell E2 to T42, put a right parentheses, hit enter, and this is the minimum of all of that data is an 8. And we can do the same thing over here with maximum. So we can click here, and actually we should be able to click here for function. I think if we put equals, we type max, and it wants the maximum value. And we could do the same thing we did before, but now I know it goes between E2 to E242. And you can see as I type that in, it's actually selected everything based off of what I typed. And if I hit enter, close that. So now my maximum value is 420, which happens to be this first one. All right, that's good. Now for the first and the third quartile, we need to use a different function. So I'm going to left click, I'll do it here. So I type in equals, and then if I start typing in the word quartile, we want to use this quartile function. So left click that. Now it wants all the data. So the data is going to be from, for me, E2 to E242. Okay, and then after the data, if I hit comma, now it's asking me for the quartile number. So I think I can put a number 1 there to be first quartile, and then close parentheses and hit enter. And 75 is my first quartile for this height data. And I can come over here, type equals, start typing quartile, left click on this quartile function. And I could type in the range that I want, but I'm going to do this over here on the left to show you how I did it. So if I left click on the first cell, scroll down to the last cell, hold down the shift key and left click. There it says E2 to E242. Let me scroll back up to the top. And then I need to put a comma. And then the quartile number will be 3. Right parentheses, and then hit enter. And 154 is our third quartile. Okay, and we can do the same thing here with drop. So let's see here. If I select this cell and I drag down, okay, it copies the formula from this cell down to this one. Okay, and it's telling me, let's see, I think that's going to confuse things. Let's just do it from scratch. So I'm just going to put equals, and then I'm going to do the minimum. But now instead of doing the minimum of the height random variable, I want to do it for the drop random variable. So I'm going to left click here, scroll down to the bottom, and left click there. And then hit right parentheses and hit enter. And so the minimum of the drop random variable was 47. And then I can come over here, put equals maximum. And I can type it in this time. So I know it goes from F2 to F242. And then right parentheses. And the maximum value is 400, which happens to be this first one. And then we can do the same thing with quartile. So we can make sure you put equals first. Notice that if I just started typing the word quartile, it doesn't pull up a function for me to use. So make sure you start it with an equal sign. And we'll do quartile. And it's trying to guess what I want. It's guessing wrong. So I'm going to choose quartile here. And I want to go from F2 to F242. Yours will be different. And then the first argument is the data, which I've put in there. And then we have to put a comma so that we can put the quartile number. So we want quartile 1 for this column, right parentheses, enter. So the first quartile is 95. And let's do the same thing over here, except this is going to be for the third quartile. So we'll click here for quartile, and it goes from F2 to F242, comma, third quartile, right parentheses, enter. Okay. So now that we've got the minimum, first quartile, third quartile, and maximum, I'm doing 2 random variables. If you did only 1 random variable, that's fine. I'm just kind of showing you what you would do if you wanted to get 2 box plots together at the same time. Okay, so what you do now is you select these 2 rows and those columns and just click Insert Chart. And it thinks I want to scatter chart, and I don't. So instead, I want to scroll down and do a candlestick chart. Oh, requires at least 5 columns, but only 2 provided. I need to come down here and uncheck switch rows and columns and uncheck use row 2 as headers. All right. So if you get an error like I did, just make sure you scroll down to the bottom and uncheck switch rows and columns and uncheck use row 2 as headers. Okay, and so now you can see we've got something that resembles 2 box plots.